Let's go over general requirements for the Romeo and Juliet essay. It's due before spring break. It counts for 2 standards. I'm breaking it into body paragraphs and intro/conclusion. You have to have 5 paragraphs, 1 quote per body paragraph. When you do your citations, they should be in this format, ASL. You can introduce it a couple of different ways, but the recommended way is in parentheses right after the quote, just like this. I don't care if you handwrite it, you type it, you print it, or you email it to me. You have to spell my email right, so if you can't do that, I can't grade it. The topic is 3 lessons that modern-day readers can take away from Romeo and Juliet. Here's a student-generated list of some possible lessons in Romeo and Juliet. Let people decide who they want to marry. Fighting isn't always the key. Don't keep secrets. Don't be so quick to start a fight. Be careful who you fall in love with. Don't get too attached to someone. Watch what you say to the people you love. Don't run away with someone you barely know. Think things through before you act. Being quick to fight has its price. Choose what you love over what people tell you to do. Don't kill yourself just because you can't be with somebody. This is not an exhaustive list. There are several others. Nothing in here refers to the feud and the consequences of that. So that'd be a good lesson to do. That hatred has a price or consequence as well. Your task is going to be pick 3 of these and write a body paragraph about each of them. In fact, your thesis statement will be 3 lessons that can be learned from Romeo and Juliet are Lesson 1, Lesson 2, and Lesson 3. So the general layout will look like this. Your introductory paragraph should have these 4 things. You're going to have 3 body paragraphs that include these things, and then you'll have a conclusion that does these things. We're going to explain them one at a time and go through some examples. So the first thing you should have in an introductory paragraph is an attention grabber. This is something that can create common ground between author and reader by bringing up an experience that many people can relate to. You don't want to necessarily say that Romeo and Juliet is a great play, because that might not be a common experience, something that everyone experiences. Instead, you should talk about how widely taught it is at a high school level, how many movies have been made, how quoted Shakespeare is, the cultural references to Romeo and Juliet that are all over our songs, TV shows, etc. Here's an example from Harry Potter. In this bracketed section, BBC reported over 11 million copies of the 7th Harry Potter book were sold within 24 hours of its release. That figure gives an idea of the series' cult-like following. Harry Potter and J.K. Rowling have become household names, even for those who did not read the books or watch the movies. The idea here is to talk about, 1, how popular Harry Potter is. There must be something good about it if that many people bought the book. And secondly, even if you haven't read the book or the movies, you've probably heard the names at least, which speaks to, again, its popularity. The next task, number 2, establish opposing viewpoints. This is where you provide the reader with different opinions people have on the topic. It sets the tone that not everyone agrees and removes bias. So in the blue brackets here, I said critics question the value of children's literature, particularly in the fantasy genre. I'm saying that not everyone believes Harry Potter has a ton of lessons to teach. It's possible that they are just kids' books, and it's not written about reality. Number 3, establish the importance of the topic. Why should we read your paper? How does this topic affect people? And why does it matter? I included this by saying, I believe Rowling provides insight on common human experiences. Rowling explores the nature of friendship, love, death, and truth in easy-to-understand terms. And those are great reasons to read a book. Number 4 should be the easiest. It should be the last sentence in your introductory paragraph. State your paper's thesis. 3 lessons I learned from Romeo and Juliet are. For example, 3 lessons that can be learned from the Harry Potter books are to question authority, value choices over ability, and do the right thing rather than the easy thing. Notice it's 1 sentence, list with commas, and I shortened these lessons. It's not a ton of words explaining it, it's very concise. Next up are the body paragraphs. Body paragraphs include a topic sentence, and the first sentence of each paragraph must introduce what the entire paragraph is about and set a context for each detail that follows. They should have 1 focus. Each paragraph should be about 1 lesson learned. 3 fully developed arguments. This means you have to explain your lesson, provide examples, applications, etc. This includes sharing a quote from Romeo and Juliet to support each argument. Share more than 1 to earn a higher grade. Write 7 sentences minimum for each paragraph. And an extra goal should be to refute the antithesis. In at least one body paragraph, you must explain other arguments and then discuss why they are not as good as yours. This also removes bias and strengthens your argument. So here's my first body paragraph from the Harry Potter example. I said that readers are taught to question official news sources rather than accept things at face value. And this entire paragraph relates back to this sentence. I explain in my own words what happens in Harry Potter, how that lesson can be learned, and then I prove it with a quote. And I notice I introduce my quote, Albus Dumbledore says to Fudge. In terms of Romeo and Juliet, most of your quotes are going to be introduced by saying things like Romeo says or Juliet says. In my second body paragraph, my topic sentence, Rowling champions the choices the characters make rather than their inherent abilities or circumstances they were born into. The entire paragraph has to relate to that sentence. I explain things in my own words, how they happened in Harry Potter, and then I proved it with quotes, and I introduced them by saying the hat says. Or, down here, the headmaster addresses the school and says. In my third body paragraph, my topic sentence was, finally, so many characters defiantly stand up for what is right rather than taking the easy path. I explained that in my own words. I introduced my quotes, Dumbledore says this, Dumbledore says that, to prove those opinions that I was stating. Here is one example of a body paragraph about Romeo and Juliet. So our topic sentence reads, Romeo and Juliet reminds readers of the consequences of speaking harshly to the people you love. So my lesson learned there would be careful how you speak to the people you love. I explained it in my own words by saying both the Montagues and Capulets love their only children, Romeo and Juliet. Juliet's parents may not agree with her decision to reject Paris, but they surely regret their last words to their daughter. To prove that they regret those words, I introduce what Capulet said, and notice I have my citation. That quote came from Act 3, Scene 5, line 220. I go on to explain. I said the Capulets find Juliet dead by Romeo's side and decide the infamous feud should end. Capulet says, O brother Montague, give me thy hand, and here's where it's from. Montague reciprocates these sentiments, but it is too late to bring back their children. And then for bonus points, you can connect this back to modern day by saying something like, when a person says mean things to a family member, they might not always have time to take it back or change their mind before it is too late. So I've kind of generalized the lesson from Romeo and Juliet to how it could apply to anyone. For a conclusion paragraph, the criteria are show, don't tell. Don't start with things like in conclusion or to conclude this essay. It is far more effective to show that you are ending your paper than to come out and say it. Restate, don't repeat. Restate your main points, but in a new way. No repeating phrases word for word from earlier in the paper. It's extremely boring, as well as ineffective. Nothing new. Your conclusion should not contain bursts of inspiration where you list the last few reasons. Instead, it should summarize the points discussed previously. Finally, end your conclusion by giving the reader some advice. Consider your thesis and how you have supported it when choosing what advice to give. For example, tell students what to do about cyberbullying or how to stop it now that you have emphasized what a problem it is. Or, what should readers do now that they have read Romeo and Juliet? How should they apply it to their own lives?